make it hard that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
If you are not one of us, you are one of them.
What are they?
They are everyone, and they are no one. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
Someone? What are you trying to tell me? That I can dodge bullets?
No. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo?
Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?
I was...
Look again.
Who is it?
Good evening and welcome to Matrix of Perception. Live from Northern California, where fires seem to continue to destroy people's lives and our skies remain toxic. I am Monique Lessan, your host with Revolution Radio. Revolution Radio is the only 100% listener-supported radio, so please go to our website, www.revolution.radio, and click Donate. Our dedicated dial to listen numbers available 24/7 for Studio A is 605-313-0025. If you'd like to join the conversation tonight, call us at 347-688-2902. You could also call my producer, Richard Kane, at 206-855-3056. And the best way to actually join us is through Skype. Freedom Screen is how you can join. Tonight we're going to be talking with Dan Willis, former CBS newsman, about his interview in the documentary called Above Majestic. Of course, my co-host tonight is another Revolution Radio host, Keith Roberts. About Above Majestic, this documentary with Corey Goode, Jordan Sather, Emery Smith, William Tompkins, David Wilcock, and many more, shows the implication of a secret space program brought to you by the Full Disclosure Project and Secret Space Program. It is also a look at the origins, history, and conspiracies of the Majestic 12. I wanted to actually let everyone know that you can purchase this documentary video through Prime Video, Amazon, and iTunes. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Monique, Keith, what a great, wonderful surprise to be on your show again.
Thank you so much. It's been a long time. I do want to announce this is what's going on here. It's important that I actually talk about it a little bit. The death toll rises to 42 in California's Camp Fire, making it the deadliest wildfire ever in the state. And I thought last year was the deadliest. The Camp Fire in Northern California has claimed 48 lives as of November 14th, making it the deadliest wildfire ever in the state. It started Thursday morning, roaring west through the Feather River Canyon on the edge of this town, blown by cool 50 miles per hour winds that pushed flames so quickly that many residents were simply overwhelmed while trying to escape. The death toll rose to 42 on Monday evening, making it the deadliest wildfire in state history. With the discovery of 13 more bodies, including 10 in Paradise, as the grim work of identifying remains, employing rescue workers, and cadaver dogs continued in the ruins. To think about Paradise is that people expected to live out their lives here in the hills. The more than 36 residents who burned to death in cars, homes, and on foot, just imagine those lives would last longer. A town meant for retirement has burned to the ground its surviving residents scattered across Northern California in shelters, hotels, family homes far from the flames. Driving the 5-mile length of the town under unsettling orange sun, you would be hard-pressed to find more than a half a dozen buildings untouched by the fire. The question remains whether Paradise, population 27,000, but empty now, remains a town at all. In fact, our friend Brett Luter lived in Chico Paradise area, and he just put on Facebook that he's okay, and thank God for that. However, I think Ralph Rink and Marshall Rink, they had to, I think their house burned to the ground. I'm not sure, but they are all okay. They are staying with family members. I'm not sure, Dan, if you know the Rink family, Ralph Rink.
Oh, actually, I was talking to Aaron, who was working with them. Yes, tragically, Ralph Rink, he lost everything. I hear that. I was reading someplace where the community is actually suing Pacific Gas and Electric, which they noticed there was right where this fire started there in Camp Fire, there was an issue with the power lines, and the Pacific Gas and Electric is, a Rothschild company, interestingly enough. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's, we've been under, and these documents are, anybody can look them up, just do a Google search on geoengineering. They have ways of manipulating weather that could create droughts in the west and flooding in the east, and I don't know who's doing what behind the scenes, but we've never seen intensity of fires like this ever.
No, of course not, and including Southern California. So last year, October fires was devastating for us in Sonoma County. And so many people lost their lives. There was a huge lawsuit against PG&E. And of course, Southern California right after that, 2 months later. And sure enough, now again, Northern and Southern at the same time, not just like maybe, a month after last year's time. October 7th, and now it's November 7th. It's amazing. I'm not sure, but we're going to be talking about this most likely on my next show and much more. We're going to connect the dots, trying to find out what's going on. I'm going to bring some speakers to talk exactly about this. But let's move on with tonight. You were involved, Dan, with this incredible documentary, Above Majestic. Or is it called Above Majestic 12? Either way, this is I've been watching it since yesterday, and it's quite amazing. I know Keith has been watching it as well. Let's connect the dots here. there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to let you just take over. But I do want to get into the subject of the cabal and the connection with the Antarctica. Let's start that from that point on.
Well, yeah, the movie, apparently there's quite a hunger for what's going on out there. You know, the movie hit number one the first day on both Amazon and iTunes. You know, it synthesizes a whole lot of elements. You know, you and I, you helped work with Dr. Michael Salon using your detective investigative skills with Admiral Rico Bodo. And, substantiating some of William Tompkins' testimony, who has, substantial testimony and people who backing him up, where he worked, admirals and captains that are in the Navy, supporting him. So he's not like somebody who just came out of nowhere and just made up a story. He's got quite a bit of documentation. Unlike the other, secret space program witnesses that came out from the 21st century on, the year 2000, they don't have the luxury of doing that because of the way these underground operations are. That you just can't, bring out proof of what you're talking about. It would have to be somebody like Tompkins and somebody like a UK hacker that saw the National Press Club, which I was one of the top secret witnesses that testified back in 2001. He was inspired, Gary McKinnon, who hacked into the Naval Space Command computer system and noticed that there was the secret Navy space program with non-terrestrial officers and fleet-to-fleet transfers. He saw large cigar-shaped spacecraft, the USSS, not USS, but USSS Hillenkotter and Lee May. Hillenkotter was, by the way, the first CIA director and one of the first MJ-12 members. Lee May was also an MJ-12 member who was is vehemently opposed to the Navy taking over control of the program, but the film, I thought, did a fairly decent job on putting together so many different elements of how the secret space program, developed in the early days of, the developing anti-gravity, and that how essentially the Nazis were about 2 decades ahead of us, that were able to intimidate President Eisenhower into an agreement back in February 1955 where, he lost control to the industrial military complex of corporations that were tied into this Nazi alliance. And that what happened was, all the operations, it's interesting, Operation Deep Freeze happened right after that, and so what they were doing was they were helping the Nazi faction, I guess you could say, with the industrial might of the United States, basically went into an alliance where the U.S. Navy was doing its own program separately because of a split that happened back in the late 40s. And so the Navy had developed its own space fleet that launched back in the 1980s with large, intergalactic spaceships. That all this sounds like, just an amazing science fiction story. And, a lot of people, probably have a hard time wrapping their mind around it just because of the name of the show, the Matrix of Perception, just because we have been basically raised into this controlled perception matrix that has kept a lot of the secret through our education system, the mainstream media, Hollywood, even, I had 10 years of experience working with scientists and inventors that all received, many of them received national security orders that we haven't been able to release these advanced technologies, which, curiously enough, when President Trump did his inauguration speech where he hinted at being able to release these new technologies having to do with health, in other words, advanced life extension and, energy devices and the technologies of tomorrow. He did a secret memorandum that put an order to release in stages some of the thousands. There's about close to about 6,000 of these national security orders, which basically is a gag order for any inventor or scientist that comes up with a solution to get off of nuclear, oil, or coal, or in health or anything. So, that we may be seeing, my God, an incredible transition that the world has never seen. We've basically been living in this little bubble reality that has kept all this hidden from
Matrix.
The population. From a matrix that has kept it hidden from the population of this world for decades, and it's leaking out. It's leaking out all over the place. And people are starting to piece it together, as they put the pieces together. It's like, one.
But I think that most likely like-minded people are putting it together. But I promise you, Dan, majority of people around the world are not. They're shocked, even at the slightest reveal of some type of a conspiracy is going on, some kind of a matrix is going on. They don't want to believe it.
Oh, it's so true. So true. It's as Dr. Greer used to say, it really keeps its own best secrecy, because it's so far removed from our, daily agreed upon reality of what we know. We drive in our internal combustion engines. We have power from coal mines and dangerous nuclear power plants. We have, smartphones and tablets and, all that stuff. But all this is like, if we were to see the technologies that have been hidden, it would look like far beyond anything you would see in a Star Trek episode,
But, don't you agree, Dan, that the cabal is actually counting on the naivety and stupidity of people not wanting to believe such a science fiction? They're going to make sure that majority of people think this is science fiction. It's just a movie.
Well, they've been there's white hats and black hats. It's not our government, It's like there's, when Eisenhower lost control back in 1955, he set up a secret U.S. Marine Corps intelligence unit that if this group, this faction that has basically with the Nazis who had gained into an alliance with a predatory extraterrestrial race, if they ever in the future were to completely take over our constitutional republic, they would become active. And, I had no hope because back when after I went to Washington, I saw how they effectively sanitize this information so the public doesn't become aware. But back when November of last year, when these Q posts, which is comes out in the Above Majestic movie, it talks about Q being military intelligence, and they're setting all the elements in place, such as executive orders to incarcerate anybody doing human rights abuse or corruption. They've set up new changes in the Uniform Code of Military Justice for war crimes. Ever since 9/11, we've been in a state of war, which would mean that these people doing treasonous acts, of which they have the proof of. They basically Admiral Mike Rogers, who tipped Trump off that they were, spying on him, using the justification of the, concocted Russian dossier. Essentially, they took over. The White Hats took over control of the NSA, and you and I know that the NSA's got backdoors to and access to every single communication on this planet. And they basically used that, turned it against the cabal. And so they know who all these people are. You know, they have about 60,000 sealed indictments that they've collected. And each one of these sealed indictments can tag up to 93 people. So it could be more than 60,000 people. And when you think back about the Nuremberg trials of Nazi Germany, that was only about 1,800 indictments. We have 60,000. So, you know, we're talking about an infiltration that has spread into our society structure. And what they do is they take high executive positions, you know, like on your dollar bill, you know, like you have the pyramid with the eye on the top, you know, in the pyramid. Well, basically, that pyramidal structure, just like in the military where you have the chain of command, where if you have somebody who is the commander-in-chief as president, or in the Supreme Court or any position, you have control of that because everything is subservient, you know, down below that chain. And so what they've done is they've put their people in these positions, and you know, Department of Justice, FBI, you know, all sorts of different departments that they're basically, I don't know if people who've been paying attention, but they've been firing and terminating a lot of these people who are, you know, considered the black hats or compliant with the cabal's agenda.
Of course. And, you know, as a result of the Operation Paperclip, which actually the Germans convinced the U.S. government to bring their Nazi scientists to U.S. to get involved with the space program, this has been going on a long time, to place such people in our government and let it just penetrate through and so forth. And until now, this is nothing new. But how did United States allow that to happen?
Well, you have people very highly instrumental that helped this whole thing along, such as Alan Dulles, you know, was working with, you know, General Wild Bill Donovan of the OSS before it turned into the CIA, and Truman after the war. You know, they had this big fear about the Soviets, and so they were able to use, since the Nazi intelligence network, which was headed by General Reinhard Gehlen, had about 3,000 Nazi spies who were gathering intelligence on the Soviets. They put all that intelligence into little microfiches and hid them in the Bavarian mountains, you know, in places. And so they used that as a bargaining chip to bring these the Nazi intelligence into the CIA. Plus, you have infiltration of other elements that work for this. And you know, the big point, you know, that was back 1947 is when Truman initiated the CIA, which he felt was a peacetime liability, and he wanted to shut it down, but they were giving false estimates about what was going on with the Soviet Union, so it kept it alive, and it kept funneling in, you know, trillions of dollars. And so, you know, and when they went over there in 1945, after the war, they saw the advanced technology, and this was just the leftovers that they left behind. They took most of it over to Antarctica and Argentina. But they realized, my God, you know, they are so far ahead, we have to bring these scientists in. You know, and so they brought over Paperclip, which didn't bring over all the best scientists. All the best scientists, you know, Nazis moved down to Antarctica. And so not only did they do that, but they also went into the heads of the pharmaceutical corporations. Alan Dulles set up Operation Mockingbird, which a lot of people are familiar with, that they started with about 400 paid journalists, and they had, you know, New York Times and Washington Post, you know, and all the one. Now it's interesting today, you know, when you see something come out, like remember last November when the U.S. Navy fighter jet with the USS Nimitz was recording the UFO, you know, on its heads-up display. Every single major media, CNN, BBC, New York Times, Washington, the whole big long list of them. There's 5 major corporations which they all control everything we see and hear, except for the alternative media like Revolution Radio.
Right. And such.
So what they do is when they approve something, you get a green light. It's all over the place. Like when I went to Washington to testify, along with, there was 21 witnesses altogether. One of them freaked out that was part of the NRO, was actually part of the team's, Daniel Morris. He went up to the mic and he poor guy, he freaked out, in front of all. Yeah, the whole place was packed. They had 22 cameras looking up.
How did he freak out?
Oh, he just went, I 2 people had to grab him and take him away.
Really?
I've never shared that, but because they all say there was 21 witnesses. Well, actually, 20 of us gave testimonies. Each one of us, bases on the other side of the moon, nukes being shut down, astronauts told to keep quiet. What happened when we went to the moon? All of this. Presidents, CIA directors being denied access. That we have a solution to get off of nuclear oil and coal. All of this stuff, was completely sanitized by the mainstream media and copied by all of their different affiliates that they're connected with. And so the information didn't really get out. But the whole reason that National Press Club event happened back in May 9, 2001 was because ever since Eisenhower went into that agreement with the Nazis, tied into the reptilians and everything else, I know it sounds crazy, but ever since that time, they created a new MJ-12 with Allen Dulles, head of all things, who set up an assassination directive against JFK. They moved all their operations from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base over to Area 51 and S4. Eisenhower tried to gain access. He was denied access. He threatened to go in with the 1st Army out of Colorado and invade Area 51 until they were able to give 2 CIA agents. One gave a deathbed testimony that they saw the ET craft and the German craft there along with extraterrestrials. And so, Eisenhower was denied access. 10 days after Kennedy put a top-secret memo to John McCone, who was the CIA director after he fired Allen Dulles for his nefarious activities, Kennedy was assassinated. Years later, it was President Jimmy Carter who was denied access by the CIA director, George Bush Sr., because Jimmy Carter actually had a UFO experience that he actually filled out a report. And then it wasn't until that was back in 1977, and then in 93, because of Lawrence Rockefeller wanting to have disclosure, President Clinton sent a CIA director, James Woolsey. He was denied access, and so he brought Dr. Greer into a meeting, and he said, well, how can we disclose that which we don't have access to? And Dr. Greer met with some military advisors and then started collecting not just a dozen or so, but hundreds. So we have over 500 witnesses, of which I'm only one.
Yes. You number 100.
Yeah. Well,
I have the book.
It was number 100. What totally go forth is when Dr. Greer went with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, to the Pentagon, meeting with the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Tom Wilson, who they showed a list of these unacknowledged special access programs, which is how they hide this. Because with an unacknowledged access program, it doesn't matter who you are. You can be the president, you can be the head of the CIA, you are denied access. And when he found out that these programs were real, he said to Dr. Greer and Edgar Mitchell, if you can get your people together and go before the media, you have my permission. This group is illegal, quote unquote. And so that's what greenlighted the 2001 National Press Club. But of course, their elements have infiltrated our, ever since 1950 with Operation Mockingbird, completely sanitized it from the public's awareness. But on the internet, it caught on like wildfire, and a lot of people are aware. But a lot of people who just, read the New York Times and watch CNN, and, they go by, they put billions of dollars into think tanks that engineer our perceptions and our what we give consent to. And so it's so finely polished that it's hard for people to wrap their mind around that this reality is not just some lunatic fringe conspiracy group that's making all this stuff up.
Right. Is that what the deep state is, which is like typically the influential members of government agencies or the military, believed to be involved in secret manipulation or control of government policy, which is basically what I'm hearing from all this is that they own the government. Oops. Right? Is that true?
Well,
the cabal,
they own
the deep
certain people in the government, the corporations. How Eisenhower lost control was through the corporations. Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin was on Eisenhower's staff, and he was aware that, he was a very frustrated president that he had lost control to the corporations. And, he said, it's not going to be in the best of hands, which was, a gross understatement. And so there's I don't know, about 300 corporations or something. They're all tied in to basically control all of this. And that those corporations make up what he warned the public about on his farewell speech in 1961, where he said, beware of the misplaced powers within the industrial military complex. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry, that's you listeners out there on Revolution Radio, can protect our future liberties and freedoms. And Kennedy tried to warn us too. He warned about a monolithic conspiracy. It uses infiltration. That the dangers of secrecy and of secret societies, which, ironically, the Warren Commission that said, Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman, was all made up of 33rd degree Freemasons. So you have blood oaths of secrecy and loyalty going on.
Speaking of which, long known to us that secret societies have been dealing with slave trades and drug trafficking, but the CIA involvement with the child trafficking, which is also, as you probably know, Finders is the most appalling, which is something that I am very concerned, investigate, and talk about. The elite sacrifice of children is nothing that it's not a surprise. We all know it happens, but why do you think that the elite actually sacrifice children? I'm pretty sure it's because of the trauma and the release of this negative energy that they use to communicate with the darker sides.
This has been going on for quite some time. In 1976, the CIA director, William Colby, was going to expose the CIA's connection with the child sex trafficking that's going on. He was also going to expose that Israeli Mossad is, attempting to infiltrate into the CIA. And he was also going to expose about this drug operations too. In fact, it was about 1 week before he was found floating face down on the Potomac River, which was ruled a drowning accident.
Right.
so obvious, right?
Of course, it's like force that falls off the building.
Dr. Greer met with him a week prior to his death. That he was going to deliver to Dr. Greer a zero-point energy device, along with $50 million to attempt to get this out to the public. And in the John Podesta emails that were leaked, through WikiLeaks, which, the mainstream media, of course, never goes into the content of those emails. What he found was that there was emails from Dr. Edgar Mitchell that was talking about releasing the zero-point energy devices and the Vatican's awareness of the extraterrestrial intelligence, and that how the extraterrestrial races would not tolerate, violence, and Dr. Michael Sal lives over in Hawaii. Back last year when they had the where they had an alert for a nuclear attack. Let's see, the messages keep popping up and making noise on my screen here. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the secret space program of the Air Force, who is now more white hats are getting involved in this because they're realizing that they've been lied to, that the Navy actually has far more advanced technology because they're working with the Nordics. And it was the secret space program of the Air Force that took out the rogue CIA submarine. Senator, I can't pronounce his name, Inoki, said, we have, they have their own Air Force, their own Navy. In other words, they have all of their own system operating completely independent, this dark fleet of the CIA that attempted to make it look like North Korea was the culprit behind nuking Hawaii, but the Air Force took that out. And, they were also trying to do that with Japan as well, and apparently that got taken out as well.
Just so, there is something I've been thinking about releasing or revealing in my book, which has been going on for 6 years now. But hopefully by the end of this year, I'm going to finish and get out. I've been thinking about this particular thing that you just talked about. I've been involved with a part of some secret, which I'm not going to talk about it, and I haven't been talking about it at all on any of the radio shows, which I've decided to actually release or reveal in my book. I will discuss it with you after the show and see if you think that I should. Anyways.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry, my brain got totally disconnected. Skype was, the messages were coming up and going, bloop, 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 bloop.
I know.
And so it totally threw my thought train off. But anyway, I figured out how to go in the settings and turn all those little notification sounds off. It's very distracting when you're trying to put together some thoughts.
It's mine that way too. But, these secrets are coming out. I mean, these finders, secrets of these children, and of course the involvement of the CIA in child trafficking and taking children across the state lines is unbelievable, but it's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened.
It's so important, that work you do, because there's millions of people that are missing, and these operations, all the indications are, especially Michael Sala's last book about Antarctica. And it shows how, basically this stems from Nazi Germany. There were actually, corporations like Siemens and things were actually using slave labor during World War II. And they continued, they moved their operations on along with their slave labor base.
Right.
You have hundreds of these underground military facilities that,
deep underground military base. Is that what it's called, R&D or DUM? Deep underground military bases, that was called, right?
Correct. And there are joint extraterrestrial military operations going on there. I did a show, back a month or two ago with Emery Smith, who was working under Kirkland Air Force Base there in New Mexico. He has 182 levels, I believe he said, that, just one base that, where you have technology and science that's just beyond your imagination. I mean,
when you say science and technology, people think, oh, wonderful. It's just for the benefit of humankind, right? But it really isn't. That's where they make clones. That's where they psychologically and physiologically manipulate different things. We're talking about as scary, as horrible as it can be. And I don't think that's... and, of course, the cabal doesn't want people to know anything about these R&D bases in Antarctica. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, none of this they want to come out. This movie that came out, Above Majestic, is definitely a red pill. A lot of people that it's going to be hard for some people to imagine that the Navy, when they started developing these anti-gravity engines, the first thing that they the Navy knows submarines, right?
Right.
And submariners are used to being in these little compartments and living in that way, and the whole thing is basically set up. So they basically took out the nuclear reactor and retrofitted them with these anti-gravity engines and actually went out into space with them because, the Navy is already building and knew how to work with these with the submarine format. And so from what I understand now, I mean, this sounds pretty bizarre, but the Navy, started, when the split happened, they were reverse engineering back in 1942, when the Nazis had already landed on the moon. The Navy was taking from the Battle of L.A., They had 2 downed ET drone craft. One was taken to China Lake in California. The other one was taken to Wright-Patterson, and where the Air Force, the Army Air Force at the time, and they were reverse engineering. And so when the Navy eventually moved their operations up to Utah near the Wasatch Mountains, but started basically we're doing it modular construction to make these kilometer-long spacecraft, but now they are making them off-planet. And it's like the U.S. Navy, in the space program, is what we used to see back in the 60s and 70s. Interestingly enough, that Star Trek came from the Office of Naval Intelligence, which, Admiral Rick Oboda, his contemporary, was Admiral Leslie Stevens, whose son was the creator of The Outer Limits, and also gave the script and everything to Gene Roddenberry for Star Trek. So they were basically, notice that it's not General James T. Kirk, it's Admiral, in other words, Navy,
right.
James T. Kirk. And so what we see with, teleporters and all these things going on, in the old 60s, 70s, Star Trek is what's actually going on, with the Navy's secret space program.
Oh, absolutely.
And beyond.
Yeah, and beyond. Sounds like one of those Star Trek episodes, and beyond. And honestly, we have Star Trekkers, right? People who absolutely love the show. They follow it as a science fiction. There's no way people actually think that the Star Trek was anything remotely close to reality. They would freak out. Let me, for a second, bring Keith Roberts. What did you think, Keith, when you saw the Majestic 12, Above Majestic? What was your opinion, your thought about that show?
It was extremely well done, Dan. And I thought the range of the information was excellent, too. Really covered an enormous amount of ground. And so very, very well done, sir.
Definitely.
Well, they could do a little improvement on the soundtrack mixing, that's for sure. But I think they're re-uploading, for the people that, get it on iTunes and Amazon, a new version that has a little bit better of a sound mix on it. But it went through a spectrum. It went all the way back to, my God, the Eisenhower situation where they lost control, all the way up to, QAnon and what's going on with military intelligence behind the scenes to take down this deep state cabal, you could say.
Right. While we have a little bit of time, Dan, I want to get into William Tompkins. I saw his testimony. As you know, I read the book that Michael Salla wrote. I have 2 of his books, and one of them about the Navy and the involvement of the Nordics with the Navy. And I forgot, it was a long title, I believe. And I thought that it was fascinating watching him at the age of 93, speaking so well about his experience and what he saw and what in regards to the German spy that went to. I mean, it was a Navy American spy that went to Germany actually, and what he found out and what he saw, and he came back and revealed. Tell us a little bit about William Tompkins. A lot of people know who he is, but many people don't.
Well, it was back in, I think it was 1941, 42, in that area. Anyway, he was an incredible lad that, his dad used to take him on board the Navy ships and stuff. And he had a photographic memory, and he would create a scale model in incredible, aircraft carriers with little tiny planes. But the thing is that he had such a great photographic memory that there was like top secret equipment and things on these Navy ships. And What happened was, it was in a Hollywood department store window, and a couple of Navy officers of the Office of Naval Intelligence saw this, and they said, "Holy cow!" And they grabbed this, and they said, "We got to bring him into the Navy." And so what happened was, he was brought in as an information disseminator. Mm-hmm. He worked at the place where coincidentally my father worked back in the 40s, Naval Air Station San Diego, where there was a special building which Admiral Riccobotta would meet, where they had 29 Navy spies embedded into the Nazi secret space program. That these young Navy guys, of course, they were German descent and everything, in order to infiltrate into the SS and the programs. Mm-hmm. They were trying to gather as much information. We were trying to catch up. Here they had like hieroglyphs of the reptilian, extraterrestrial. They had different designs and stuff, and so they'd bring these packets of information. And so he would sit on this table with Admiral Riccobotta, and there would be like a couple of PhDs, and there would be all these secretaries that would be the stenographers that would convert this information. And so they would help put this together. And then his job as an information disseminator, which, by the way, Dr. Michael Salla was able to do a Freedom of Information Act request and find the actual traveling chits where he was, confirming more with documentation that he went to, McDonnell Douglas, mm-hmm. Boeing, the different universities. Anyway, they had these secret groups that were attempting to decipher this information, to try to catch up with the highly advanced technologies that the Nazis had mm-hmm. able to glean from working with this extraterrestrial race. As interestingly as Dr. Hermann Oberth, who was the father of modern rocketry and the mentor of Wernher von Braun's, when they asked him, well, how did the Germany get so far advanced? How mm-hmm. they? And his reply was, "We had help from the people from other worlds." I mean, this is a known thing. I mean, my God, mm-hmm. how do you interpret that any other way than an extraterrestrial race assisting the SS?
Right.
So,
William Tompkins wrote a book called "Selected by ETs." And
selected by extraterrestrials, yes.
Extraterrestrials, yes. How was? Do you believe that he was chosen, and how did he know, and what did he know? And tell me a little bit about that. I thought that. Do you believe that he was chosen by the extraterrestrials?
Well, he was what they called a preferred contactee because he had, I guess, a certain type of mind that when he was working at the secret think tank that was in Santa Monica at Douglas Aircraft, there was a special secret compartment within there where they were. This was what was called Project Rand at the time.
Yes.
And what was happening was he was working with, the rest of the title of the book is Selected by Extraterrestrials, working with, Nordic secretaries and things. So
Maria Ostrich.
His secretary, which his name was Jessica, which they showed him a picture, coincidentally, of Maria Orsic, and he said, "Oh, that's her. That's Jessica. Looked exactly like her," which is kind of curious because in the Myers case in the 70s, where they had Pleiadian contact and the ship came out and Simjazi comes out, he was shown a picture of Maria Orsic, and he says, "That's Simjazi." So these Nordic extraterrestrials, they don't live like we do. We most of us don't drop off before we hit 100 years. They live the hundreds, even thousands of years in age. And part of this is, according to Tompkins, this sounds even more crazy, but their planet's been under the control of this Draco Reptilian Federation for over 6,000 years.
Well, Dan, so this Draco extraterrestrials work in a dark way. Some people say that they're not so dark, the reptilians, in comparison to the Nordics that work with the Navy. How different their style is.
Well, not all reptilian races are bad. There's a lot of good reptilian races. There's a spectrum of different races out there that vast majority of them are benevolent, and as Keith knows, some are predatory. It's like a jungle. There's crocodiles and bunny rabbits. There's a spectrum out there in the universe, and what Tompkins was doing when he was working at Project Rand was he was getting designs and things. Interestingly enough, Dr. Robert Wood was working at the same McDonnell Douglas and verified the people that he worked with and everything, to substantiate his story. He also has documentation that showed that he worked with the Lunar Operations Command, with NASA, for the Apollo missions, where he actually saw on the live video screen, which was coming directly from the moon transmission, of the large Draco reptilian craft that was lined up along the far edge of the crater that essentially warned us off the moon. They basically put up a no trespassing sign. And that's why we didn't go back.
Interesting. We have just maybe a minute before we go on. Let's just kind of introduce again Above Majestic, and you can actually buy it at Prime, Amazon, and iTunes. And where else can we purchase this? Can we purchase it on your website or on your blog? And let's give everyone your blog as well.
Well, I just want to be clear. I have never made one penny at this. I never will have a financial interest in this. And that's one thing that happens in this community is that people who have financial interest immediately get tired at it and say, ulterior motive, for coming out with this information. But no, you can rent it for $5 on Amazon, high definition, and you can watch it there. Or I don't have an Apple system, so on iTunes as well.
Right.
So it's it's an eye-opener movie.
Oh, absolutely is. And just like Keith was saying, it goes from many, many different subjects. It's recent, it's historic. You can actually learn a lot by watching this. And I absolutely love the way it's done. The lighting, the interviews, very well made. David Wilcock also did a great job. I have to raise my hat to him. I met him at one of the conferences, in the UFO conferences in San Jose. Very well he speaks very well. So again, it's $4.95 or something like this, and is well worth it. Oh my God, I can't believe it's so cheap. In fact, I thought for sure it's going to be so much more.
Oh, well, it started out, I think it was like $15 or something, but I just happened to notice it was up for $5, which is great, because more people
can afford
can watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When it's a little bit expensive, it becomes difficult for people financially, but this way more people can buy it and become aware of it. So stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back, everyone, to Matrix of Perception. I am Monique Lessan from Northern California with Dan Willis and, of course, Keith Roberts. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with me. And we're talking about Above Majestic. And what a great show. What a great documentary. I really enjoyed it, Dan. I'm hoping that people go to Prime Amazon, and, of course, iTunes and purchase it. It's only, I think, $4.95. Very, very cheap. Yeah.
$4.99.
$4.99. Okay, 4 cents.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
So I just want to say it's so great to be back on your show, Monique. It's been quite a while, and I haven't been idle all this time. I've been spending a lot of time researching, and as the more you dig into all this stuff, it's like, all of a sudden, the whole picture starts to connect together, and
I have to give you
incredible.
A compliment. When I met you back in '90s, and you did my first website, and we became friends, and we stayed friends, I never knew you are such a great speaker. I mean, I know Keith Roberts will agree with me. It's the way you talk, and I get so many compliments every time you're on my show. I get emails and text messages on my Facebook. They like the way you express yourself. And after seeing this documentary, Above Majestic, you're one of the best speakers in it. I really, really enjoyed seeing you. And you just don't age.
Yeah. I look like hell in that movie. This turkey outside my window kept me up all night. I didn't get any sleep. My hair's sticking out all over the place. But hey, it's a good ego burn. The message is what's important.
No, Dan, seriously, you have not aged since I've known you back in the '90s. So that is really amazing. Let's just not go there. I want to know what you use on your face. Please text message me that cream. The name of your, and of course, well, you know what? You have had those turkeys for a long time.
They're diabolical. Yeah, they.
Are they wild turkeys, or are you raising them, Dan?
Oh no, there's a fleet of wild turkeys come around every so often. They. There's a lot of wild creatures. I live off grid up on top of this mountain out in the Siskiyou Mountains of Southern Oregon, and we got a lot of creatures.
Right, and I was very curious. How did you get a call, and how did you come about to be on this documentary Above Majestic?
Well, let's see. How did that come about? Well, I had a connection with Jordan Sather, who was working with JJ, part of the production crew, and they came out and interviewed me. And Michael Salla knows me, and other people, and so I just contributed my little bit, to the movie. I was surprised they included me so many times. It was talking about, what happened with Eisenhower losing control, and about what happened with Kennedy and the assassination, and about the nukes being shut down. And
a question for you. When you talk about Eisenhower losing control, of course, Laura Eisenhower is in this documentary as well, which I really enjoyed her little part there too. Didn't
his granddaughter.
Yes, of course. How did he lose control? It seems like he made a treaty with the gray aliens for information on reverse engineering versus abductions.
That's a very, very critical and important question you're just asking, because that's really a turning point where our legal government is no longer functioning as it used to. Our legal government no longer had any jurisdiction out of these operations. That's why they moved everything over to Area 51 and S4, and that's why they got rid of the original MJ-12 group and put Alan Dulles as MJ-1 and all the other, cabal compliant, people in the Majestic position. Eisenhower basically got into office through the funding of Nelson Rockefeller with all the money. And when he came in to the office, he had Nelson Rockefeller restructure all the operations so that, he had plausible deniability. He was then disconnected. And then he realized what a mistake that was. That now, when he went to try to see what was going on in Area 51, that's when he was denied access. That's why he threatened to invade Area 51 with the First Army out of Colorado because he knew he had no longer had control. And basically, it was the corporations of the industrial military complex that he warned about that. See, what happened was the Nazis had anti-gravity in 1934. It wasn't until, I believe it was August of 1954 that the United States finally had developed anti-gravity. We were like 20 years behind the Nazis. And so in 1952, when that fleet of spacecraft was going over the Capitol building, that they were trying to explain, it's nothing but temperature inversions and stuff like that. That was a show of force from the Nazis. That not only that, but Operation High Jump, where Joseph Stalin did his own investigation into that, and we lost every single plane and a ship or two, I believe. At least one ship, and we had to limp back. And of course, Admiral Byrd had sworn to secrecy. He was sent down by James Forrestal to basically attack the Nazi base down there, and Truman had to put him in the hospital under guard, that he couldn't leave. And it was Lyndon B. Johnson, who was in the Navy at the time. I think he was like just a lieutenant or something like that. He came up to try to talk Forrestal into going along with the program, and he was talking about the Nazi base down in Antarctica.
So Forrestal was against the Majestic 12, and finally he was actually thrown out of the building. And they said that it was a suicide. Is that because of what he had told Admiral Byrd to do in Antarctica?
Forrestal was one of the MJ-12 key members. Was headed by Admiral Rickon Hillenkotter, who warned about the dangers of secrecy and wanted to have congressional hearings to bring this forth. But what happened was, when RAND, Project RAND that we talked about earlier, back in the late 40s, 1948, 49, General Haplin, I got to look up his name anyway. He brought in a huge amount of money, and so it forced the Navy out doing its own program in secrecy. And so Project RAND turned into the RAND Corporation, and basically they had to assassinate
Forstall.
And that was in May of 1949. I was about 1 month old at that time. And
but not before he was able to talk to Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, about what's going on, right? I mean, he really brought in a lot of information to him.
Absolutely, yeah. Kennedy was on Forstall's staff, and he was over there looking at this technology in Germany. At the end of the war, but Kennedy has going back to, he was aware he was in Office of Naval Intelligence, so he was aware of what happened in 1942. Kennedy was well aware of what was going on. There's a Majestic 12 document that was highly authenticated that he was briefed by the Secretary of the Air Force on all of this stuff, and Kennedy. What was I going to say? In the Majestic document that was authenticated, they talked about how it was kind of regrettable but necessary because of the death of James Forstall. Because Forstall wanted the public to know the truth, what was going on. Kennedy also wanted the public to know the truth, what's going on. That's why
they both got killed.
He was silenced, yes.
And then, of course, Robert Kennedy was brought in. Right, exactly. And Robert Kennedy was brought in afterward too. He got killed.
I'm sorry, who was?
Robert Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's kind of interesting.
Right.
The CIA has, they know how to work with hypnosis. There's a hypnotist named Darren Brown that absolutely proved that you can hypnotize somebody to be a Manchurian candidate. And Sirhan, still doesn't remember anything that happened. They can implant a program in a person's mind. And interestingly enough, in the example that Darren Brown did, he had a woman in a polka dot dress walk in front of this guy, and that's the trigger. When you see or a key word or something can be a trigger that initiates the subconscious program, and then all of a sudden you either forget or you commit suicide yourself after you commit the deed. And in the actual murder of Robert Kennedy, there was a woman in a polka dot dress that ran out in the fire escape and said, "We did it. We killed Kennedy." Suspiciously enough, they couldn't find her.
Before it happened, right?
After.
Okay, yeah. So do you think that was the trigger for Sirhan?
It's suspicious, and most likely, and you have suspicious activities going on with John Lennon, who is doing Imagine. It's like I by the way, I wrote a completely revamped Imagine This that actually takes in all of this knowledge and what's going on with the Q military intelligence posts and goes into the future. Anybody wants to check it out, go to thewebmatrix.net and then click on Imagine This. And I put all the references of the children in the future looking back through the challenges and how it transformed into a beautiful future. Keith, I sent a link to him. What did you think of that, Keith?
I haven't looked at that yet, actually.
Oh, okay.
Did you send it to me recently? I don't even remember.
Oh yeah, I sent you a link, but it's based on factual things, but it's using our creative, co-creative imagination to actually put it out there into the reality, because we're finding out more and more about consciousness, that as we imagine and believe, it actually
becomes.
Yes.
Right, absolutely. As it is in your mind, it is in your reality. And in fact, do you believe that consciousness requires awareness? And if so, does everything in our galaxy has awareness? And does it mean they all have consciousness? I mean, the other way. Does everything in our galaxy has consciousness and therefore awareness?
Well, the two are kind of inseparable, in a way.
Well, I was thinking about that because I went to a conference just recently on consciousness, and the speaker was talking about everything that has consciousness has to have awareness. And then I'm looking at my plants. I'm wondering, well, does my plants have consciousness? And if so, does it have awareness? And there's a lot of things that it's a huge question mark for me.
It's been proven. It's been proven. Plants do have awareness. They put on, I forget what they're called, but they put on little encephalograph guys or whatever, and you can talk to your plant and you can see it react. It's proven.
Right.
It's my view that all is consciousness, and I agree with Dan. We're moving into a very bright future. I'm very optimistic.
Yes, you're the most optimistic person I know. That's great. And seriously, Dan, I also wanted to ask permission to use a little bit of your the web matrix material, which is one of the most incredible material at this time. You should make it into a book. I want to include a little bit parts of it into my book, because I think
please use everything. I don't charge for anything. Everything's free. I just want to share knowledge. I want to compare notes with other people. I may get things wrong. I'm just like everybody else, but I'm doing my due diligence and researching, and just want to share with other people. And yes, plants do have consciousness. I worked with Dr. Marcel Vogel, who was written up in the book Secret Life of Plants, and he was able to connect to a plant that was in his IBM laboratory, and then he went all the way on the other side of the planet in Prague, Czechoslovakia, and was able to make the script chart squiggle at the exact time that he was connecting with his consciousness to the plant. So yes, and regardless of space and time, everything has consciousness.
And because of that, your reality really manifests through your thoughts, your words, especially your thoughts, because everything is alive. Because everything around you and in this earth is, and beyond, is so alive, you can actually really create your reality by focus your thoughts on one idea, one thought. And if you combine forces with other people, it's even more powerful. I have to say, I'm a witness to that. I know it's true. So your thoughts being positive or negative, in fact, you have to watch what you think. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. That multiple factor is so true. They did a research at Stanford University where they found that, one person has a certain amount of power, a man or a woman has a certain amount of power, but with two people, like two men, or two women, that has a certain amount of effect. They found out a man and a woman connect to do whatever the test they were doing. It had a 7-fold increase in the ability to whatever they were doing, telekinesis or whatever.
Right.
So yes, there is a incredible power that we have, especially, we have an incredible vehicle here, we're talking to millions of minds out there listening to us right now.
Right.
And this information is running through their head, and I recommend everybody, question everything that's being said, research, because when you start to research, you'll find out, like many of us that have been researching this, is like, oh my God, this reality is true. It's just like Neo in the Matrix, when
Right, absolutely.
when he got plugged in and found out what the real reality was,
What's really going on. And I interviewed Nick Redfern a few months ago on the Slender Man. What I found was interesting how even your negative thoughts, your biggest fears can create monsters, and then you put it and multiply by thousands of minds that read and focus on that thing. You can actually create your biggest fears to come to life. And through internet, it even focuses more. So
this is why Hollywood has so many images of people killing and hurting other humans with guns and things constantly, why you see apocalyptic movies. They know the dark elements behind some of the productions that go on through Hollywood and come out, although there are some good elements coming out as well. They've known for a long time that, if you put all this dark imagery and fearful things, that people are more controllable, and it also helps manifest these realities. We've seen a complete increase in some very, very crazy dark activity going on the planet, with mass shootings and all this stuff. There is an effect that happens with what you watch and what you believe.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to be talking about this mass shootings and the effect of it that is happening. 68 just this year in 2018. And the guy who survived the Las Vegas shooting got shot and killed in Thousand Oaks. I mean, what are the chances that he was in the other mass shooting and he was in Thousand Oaks and he was one of the people who got killed? Unbelievable. But it's
unbelievable.
True.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing is that all these music videos and concerts, and you see more and more this effect of the negative energy that the secret societies are trying to control everyone through this media. Ads, videos, concerts, you see them. It's not hidden. It's right out there.
The wonderful thing about being on the light side of the force is that truth has this incredible ability to resonate within people, where, if you're doing lies and you're deceiving, you have to cover up one lie with another lie. When you have a message and there's love behind the message, it has a far greater power than a dark message does.
Absolutely. Which brings me to, again, back to Germany and the Draco reptilians. Why did the Draco reptilians choose Germany to build the Antarctica and the settlement in Mars and the Moon? And what else were the Germans told by the ETs to accomplish for them?
Oh, excellent question. Another really important question that, people think, well, if they've got this advanced technology, why didn't they win the war? Well, they did win the war. They infiltrated in, they took over, and they used the industrial might of the United States for what the Draco reptilians were using the Nazis to. They basically gave them the spacecraft and worked with them to help build. They utilized the Nazi SS to construct and build, and then when the agreement in 1955 happened with the Eisenhower administration, then they were able to pull in. After they were intimidated and forced in, Eisenhower was, they had this technology that completely wiped out Operation High Jump, where they flew over the Capitol building in 1952. They were totally, basically, intimidated them to force them into this agreement. And so now with the industrial might of these corporations that were tied in with the Nazis, and from the higher level, if you look at the Nazis as just being a faction of this cabal, you could say, basically what the Navy spies that were reporting back was they couldn't believe what they were saying. They were saying that they were basically going for intergalactic conquest, where they were going to other worlds with the Nazis as a backup fleet. They call it the Dark Fleet, working alongside with the Draco-Reptilian Federation to go in and enslave other planets.
Mm-hmm. And
so,
go ahead.
And so, we had ticker tape parades and victory, and everybody was so tired of the war, and it was like that's the message we wanted to hear. We didn't want to know about anything else.
Right.
We didn't understand that the Nazis had this plan called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare. They planned to infiltrate into the United States, create a matrix of perception, the name of your show, that effectively the Nazis didn't use a quantitative approach. We're making planes and tanks and everything to try to defeat. They used qualitative, where they had super advanced technology. They were able to infiltrate in. They didn't need to come in with planes and bombing and tanks and all this stuff. Essentially, the Nazis won. You could say. I know a lot of people are going to, go against that, but essentially they infiltrated in and they took over. They took over NASA. They took over pharmaceutical corporations. They took over our education. They rewrote the history of what happened.
And they won. No, it's clear that they won, and we know that. And you can imagine, by talking to so many people, they will never. I mean, almost 100% of the people that I have talked to about the fact that we brought in 3,000 Nazis into the United States and gave them jobs in our secret space programs and more, they don't know that. They think that we won. That is not true.
Oh, yeah, and the Vatican was working with it, with the Knights of Malta and all these passports that they provided for the Nazis. In fact, you can go to the CIA website. There's even a document that talks about, it's called the Vatican's Nazis and the CIA, and it shows a whole relationship. Joseph Mengele and Barbie, and the whole bunch of them. They were all on CIA payroll. So this is whole working together. But the good news is Eisenhower had the forethought to set up the Secret Marine Intelligence Unit, which we are now seeing all the ducks are kind of getting in a row. They had Judge Kavanaugh with the Supreme Court position. They've got the executive orders. They've got the sealed indictments. And now they have all the evidence. So the next step in taking down this cabal that's connected with the Nazis is to reveal this, declassify this information that will anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, or what race you are, or what religion you are, or whatever your perspective is on all this. When this information gets exposed to the public, anybody with half a sense will see, oh my God, this is what's actually been going on, and these people are dark, evil, and we need to have military tribunals, and these people need to be tried and incarcerated and taken out of position. And these technologies need to be released for the good of mankind. We have technologies, and it would save millions of people, because if we ever get a corona mass ejection comes in, the power distribution grid will completely fry. Millions of people will die.
Right.
And so what we need to do is start the production of these little tiny boxes that can replace every single home and business with a zero-point energy, non-polluting, totally clean energy, recycle all these power grid wires that are running all over the place that are ugly anyway. And, the power companies aren't going to like it, but I'm sorry. it's the future of humanity.
People don't know. People don't think like you. And I know you've done this for your own place, and it works, but a lot of people are not aware, let alone know how to do it.
Well, I would love to have a zero-point energy device. It would work much better than these archaic, lead-acid batteries and solar panels. The patent office got infiltrated by them as well, using national security apparatus called the Sensitive Application Warning System. Anybody has a solar panel over 28%, they get one of these national security orders.
Oh,
or if
really?
you have anti-gravity, or if you have any type of technology that would get us off of these dangerous, obsolete technologies, they get a gag order, a secrecy gag order called the National Security Order. And there's thousands of these. And so that's what Trump is going to release. His uncle, John Trump, was the MIT professor that was called in by the FBI to go into Tesla's safe when he died and look at all his papers and evaluate if there was anything of significance, of which, of course, he publicly said, there was nothing. But, he was also, according to the recent research of Dr. Michael Salla, who found one of the top secret documents that was involved with General Twining's evaluation of what happened with the Roswell crash, and they were evaluating the technology. MIT was brought in, and no doubt John Trump, President Trump's uncle, was brought in on that as well. And so he used to hang out with his uncle a lot and share a lot of information. So no doubt, he knows about these advanced technologies that have been suppressed for a long time, and how it could it'll affect every single, we can have desalination of our oceans. We could take the geoengineering that they're using and actually improve our weather rather than use weather warfare against us. We don't even need roads. We can have anti-gravity vehicle. We can populate different parts of the planet that are normally inaccessible. It would be a total game changer the world has never seen before.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And by the way, I wanted to just mention that I talked to Brett Luter just very briefly today, and he was saying that the people of Paradise, many witnesses have seen these blue beams hitting the ground.
They have these maser satellites that can, high power masers that, there's like microwave energies that can steer a hurricane. It can change the jet streams so that some areas are completely drought-ridden, while other areas get, hit with massive hurricanes and flooding. They have this technology, and anybody can Google it and look it up. It's in the government, documents, that shows that they, a long time ago they planned on mastering the weather, and they did.
Well, direct energy weapons out in space. Well, that's another story.
And that too, yeah. The directed energy weapons that can destify buildings, like
right.
11.
Well, the other thing I was going to talk about was above Majestic, they were talking about these elongated skulls, and who has these elongated skulls? Obviously, a long time ago, they lived among us, and it seems like they still live among us. Perhaps the people of the Vatican, they're wearing these big hats, and some of the people in charge of the secret societies, such as Masons and this Skull and Bone societies, wear these very strange cone-looking hats for ceremonies. What do you think about that?
Well, apparently, according to the research and testimonies of a number of people, that there are three large spacecraft that are down in Antarctica, Antarctica is melting because of the volcanic. It's got the largest volcanic activity on the planet down there, and so more things are going to start to be revealed. But the race that were called the pre-Adamites that had the elongated skull, they basically spread out, to Egypt and the Aztecs and different areas that and Peru that they it's quite obvious. You look at Akhenaten, he's got this long skull, and it's kind of curious that the Egyptologists, who seem to be the gatekeepers of the perception of ancient Egypt, they kind of glaze over a lot of that. But
Dan, you know what? I was in Egypt back in 2010. And having been a huge admirer of Egypt, the whole system has changed from what we're talking about, the Egyptology and the beauty that used to exist to what it is now. And things have changed. And, these elongated skulls among people don't exist anymore. I don't know what Vatican Pope and they're hiding underneath their hats is definitely not anything intelligent. I'm sure. I'm not against.
Oh, right, yeah. The hats that hide the elongated skull. Well, I think I don't know. I haven't looked under the Pope's head. It'd be kind of a hard one to hide, But I think you're right. I'm speculating. Of course, I don't have any basis of background on knowledge of that, but it does seem that there was bloodlines that established a long time ago, that these bloodlines are, curiously, people look at, the presidents and look at the presidents are all tied in. Even Obama, is connected with Bush and all these other people that are of a certain bloodline. And and that's connected with secret societies. Sure. That this knowledge that basically they believe that they are tied in with this bloodline. Maybe when they were getting all the DNA stuff, and ancestry and everything, trying to find out who's who connected to this particular bloodline.
Right.
And they are the ones who feel they are the entitled ones to be the rulers of the people of this planet, which is,
something that I noticed, or maybe I was wrong, but when I was listening to, I think maybe William Tompkins, I think he was talking about some of the reasons why Germany was chosen by the Draco reptilians was also to get rid of certain type of people. And I'm not quite sure if he was talking about the Jews and everything that happened. But why would the Dracos want that?
Well, I think it was a marriage made in hell, that the Nazi SS definitely wanted to get rid of a lot of people, and they were all about having a pure bloodline. They I know that Martin Bormann had like 500,000 women that were sorted out. About 1 out of 50 they chose, and it ended up about 10,000 Antarctic settlement women that they sent down there to. It was like 2,500 SS troops that they had 4 girls to every guy down there, and they're busy making Nazi babies, and and so they wanted to have this pure genetic bloodline that, of course, they Heinrich Himmler escaped, and the JFK files that came out, which George H.W. Bush put a 25-year secrecy order on. Shows that, Hitler escaped as well. And,
so
they just must have been... what's that?
Who died then instead of Hitler? He's... the
doppelgangers, that there was some really poor doppelgangers for Hitler. But
Right.
the one for Heinrich Himmler, there's this forensic expert of world renown that knew that Heinrich Himmler had a fencing scar on his cheek, and the doppelganger did not have that, so he knew that
Right.
was he cracked a cyanide pill. It wasn't Heinrich Himmler. But the thing is that they're looking for this pure master race, and so the genetic technologies that the Dracos had, just all working. It's just like everything that they want. It's like advanced technology, eugenics, where they can genetically engineer a more perfect race. And according to the latest secret space program witnesses that the Germans, when they set up a base on the moon, which is not what we think it is. It's a hollow spacecraft, and it's a lot of extraterrestrial races. Most of the activity is underground. And then what happened was the Germans then set up operations on Mars, and they've been working with their genetics, so they have enhanced genetics. And so you have all this stuff going on. It just sounds like the most crazy, wild science fiction movie. But as you start looking at reputable, glitches in the matrix, I guess you could call it, reputable witnesses and whistleblowers and documents, and there's always that, like my mother, who was born in Argentina, says that the old saying, the devil always forgets to put the lid on the cookie jar. That's what happens. There's
Right.
always little leaks that leak out here and there. And when you start
Mm-hmm.
piecing all the pieces together, it paints this very bizarre, yet very substantiated alternative reality that most of the people on this planet, not Revolution Radio listeners, but this other reality completely going on that
Simultaneously.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Jump on in. We only have 15 minutes or so left.
Right. Just really quick, I interviewed John Brandenburg 3-4 months ago, right before I went to Spain, actually. And he was willing to talk all about Mars, but I heard him talk on Coast to Coast about the Moon Project. He's a former NASA scientist. And after his interview with George Noory on Coast to Coast, he was told by NASA to never talk about the moon. And he would not answer any of my questions about the moon. So it seems really fascinating that you're talking about that. Yes, please, Keith, come on in. Any questions, any comments you want to say, anything to Dan? This is the time.
I love it that at the end of the, I forget who the woman was, Dan, but she was talking about consciousness, and that's really what it's all about. And we're finding people like Grant Cameron talking more about that. He says, if you want to know the truth about it, why don't you ask the experiencers instead of chasing down nuts and bolts, right? So I think everybody's getting more psychic, and we're as you said, the truth resonates, and it sort of rings bells in people. And I really see us moving towards a really kind of a Jetsons or Star Trek like technology level in a very short time. I think one of the keys that's coming up is going to be disbanding the Fed, or at least paying them off at some kind of one of my. Brooks Agnew told me recently he believes that Trump will negotiate something like $8 trillion of the $21 trillion we allegedly owe. And then, of course, Catherine Austin Fitts has found another $21 trillion missing. But at any rate, this is one of the things that's going to free us, I believe, is that we are going to soon see the Department of Treasury issuing gold-backed currency. And so I think that has to be done to get a lot of this darkness out of the way, because if we brought in free technology right now, but we still had the same evil cabal in charge, then, it could be used for bad purposes as well as good. But if we can get an honest currency system going, I see that as a big part of it. I see that as opening the doorway then for these advanced technologies. And don't forget, including in health and life extension as well.
Oh, you're spot on, Keith. It's like that's the exact same conclusion I've come to. It's really a matter of becoming aware and our consciousness with this whole thing. And absolutely, all the stuff, we have to clean house first before we can release any of this super advanced technology. And when they do, they're probably going to release it slowly, but it's not my preference. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and everything brought out. And I think the world deserves that. We've been hoodwinked for far too long.
Well, even though it is absolutely true that what you're saying, do you think the cabal or deep state allow this to happen?
They won't have any choice.
Well, we're doing it.
They're being defeated as we speak.
We're doing it right now, but I think that they're trying to get rid of cash around the world. I just came back from Spain, and I realized that how much cash has been devalued, and banks have been valued, and something that I will talk about on another show. And interestingly enough, by the way, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I was just recently in Mallorca, Spain, and 70% of all the people that are not just tourists but live like this. Okay, the second population other than the Spanish are the Germans in Mallorca. It's unbelievable how many Germans live there. I wonder if they opened the doors and allowed a lot of Germans to come in.
Well, Franco, he was fascist, and it was Spain was a very, Nazi-friendly country.
Absolutely, I know, but I mean, nothing more. I mean, I'm talking Mallorca is unbelievable. The second language is German.
Yeah, well, I think the German people are great. It's just a matter of, I think a lot of them, from what I understand from one intelligence report, that there was a meeting down with Rex Tillerson, who was then, Secretary of State, down in Bariloche, down in Argentina, which is kind of like a Nazi hotspot connection with the underground operations down in Antarctica and things. And they're wanting to join the light side of the force. They want to release these technologies and bring them out to the world. They disown, the past of their ancestors, with
bad reputation of the Germans.
The bad reputation, and
there are awesome.
And Keith is.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Keith is right about the money system has to be changed. The money system has been set up to with the central banks to basically enslave the planet, and it needs to be. Kennedy tried to stop the Vietnam War, so I won't have to go there, and he also tried to get us off of the Federal Reserve and go on the gold-backed currency, but they stopped that. So we need to get off the central bank situation, and that's causing an enslavement of the planet. And that's interesting what you're saying, Keith, about trying to cut deals with the Federal Reserve to the whole thing's a sham anyway. I mean, it's like they print, they don't have anything to back it. They just print money whenever they want,
And that's what's going on. In fact, the value of cash has gone down tremendously, not to mention the value of dollars has dropped.
99% of it. It's worth one, the dollar's worth 1 penny,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just realized that as I was traveling through Spain, they are promoting banks, actually. Everything has to go through the banks, and it's very, very watched, and it's all because of what Trump has done here in the United States, and now has its effect across Europe. You can see it. And they don't accept cash anymore. Everything has to go through banks, and taxes and everything. So it's, I wonder what's going on. Which way are we going?
I'd like to share with the listeners, I know we're just about at the top of the hour here pretty closely. A media company wanted me to write an article about media control, and so it just kept on getting longer and longer, and I keep researching and documents and witnesses and stuff like that to present day, and it's all free. If you go to www.thewebmatrix.net, not .com, but .net, you can see a chronological research from the beginning of the 20th century, the year 1900, to present day, of how this whole situation has gotten to where it's at. And I just want to share that with the listeners so you can have
absolutely, and it's free to download. And are you planning on making this into a book?
No. I don't want to make one penny out of this. People. And the people in some of the secret space program witnesses, I'm sure they realize that if you try to tie in financial interests, you get into the crosshairs of they're just making it up. They're all just wanting to make money, but they really have to look at Tompkins' testimony, look at the documentation, look at what Gary McKinnon found. They wanted to put him away for 70 years. The Bush administration for what he did, what he revealed with the Navy secret space program, and these are sources that aren't doing anything for money, that completely substantiate this reality. And all these witnesses, a lot of them are credible, but there's no way to be able to show convincing proof, to some people, that the existence of these programs exists. But if you look at research William Tompkins' testimonies, and you'll find
fascinating.
You'll find fascinating substantiation to this reality.
And he just died. I think he died in 2017 at age 93 or 94. I think that's what it is. I think that we were, in fact, going to get him on the show, but we have to bring Michael Sallow back and see where he's at with all his research at this time. I know that you're very close to him.
Yeah. I just did a show with him recently, and he's putting together a book. And we'll definitely have to get Michael Sallow on your show. And he was over there at the at the 11/11 event over in Washington D.C. going through the Library of Congress, which he's researching documents. I mean, this man does extensive research and into all this stuff. So I
do want to mention something before our hour is up. When I spoke at the Laughlin 2015 conference at the Starbucks USA, and I talked about the finders, the CIA involvement with the child trafficking, the finders, and I was showing videos and pictures and all of that. I was approached by Daniel Sheehan afterward that no, the CIA had no involvement with the finders, which was fascinating. Which is absolutely untrue because it's completely proven. The CIA involvement. It is the finders.
Oh yeah, he's worked with the Jesuits, and he's got connections with the Vatican and things like that. He was one of the witnesses. He was the one that testified that Jimmy Carter was denied access by George Bush Sr. And you get into the whole dark elements of the sacrifices and sucking adrenochrome out of terrified children, and the satanic elements. When you look at some of the Podesta emails, they look very suspicious about handkerchiefs and pizzas and all this stuff. There's a whole code word of the pedophile network.
That's right.
Which
I'm trying to
going down to that island.
And I'm trying to expose in my book Children of the Underworld, and that's what it is. I don't even care if I make any money off of it either, but this is what's going to take. It takes screaming about these subjects. It takes being on the radio, being on television, get in front of people and say until people hear you. And this is my passion, and I will talk about the finders in the book, and the at least sacrifices of the children, and the whole the negative energy that we're talking about. It is going to be in the book. So, and yeah.
And that's the whole reason why the executive order against human rights abuse was made, because of shut down these operations. So I'm very, very hopeful for the future. It looks very encouraging. I didn't think we could ever do it again, but it looks like, thanks to our military intelligence behind the scenes, it's a battle. They control the perception. They're trying to create division amongst the population. A lot of George Soros funding here and there, and but I think there isn't a chance for them.
Well, the webmatrix.net, please go to the website, and of course, Above Majestic, please purchase it, and so you can support